My son curled his lip when he looked at my hands, cracked and stained from 40 years of pouring concrete. "You embarrass me in front of my partners," he said, his voice flat and cold in a way I'd never heard from him before. "Don't come to the ribbon cutting. I want you nowhere near that building." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just nodded once, turned around, and drove home in silence. That same evening, I picked up the phone and made one call that quietly unwound every single dollar I had ever put behind his name. And by the time that ribbon-cutting ceremony happened, it became the most humiliating afternoon of his entire career. Before I tell you exactly how it all came apart for him, let me know, friend, what state you're watching from tonight. And if you've ever had to teach someone you love that respect isn't optional, hit that like button for me. My name is Walter Higgins. Everybody who's known me more than 5 minutes just calls me Walt. I'm 67 years old, and for the better part of 4 decades, my whole world has fit inside a modest brick house at the end of Larkspur Lane, out past the county line where the pavement turns to gravel and the neighbors still wave from their porches. I built that house myself, board by board, back when I was young enough that my knees didn't complain about it. These days, my sanctuary is the workshop out back, where I restore old furniture nobody wants anymore, sanding down years of neglect until the wood remembers what it used to be. That Thursday morning started like any other. I had coffee going, sawdust in the air, and a radio playing gospel hymns low enough not to wake the birds. I was working on an old oak rocking chair somebody had left out for the trash, running my thumb along a joint to see where the glue had failed, when I heard a car pull up the driveway. Not just any car, the kind of car that costs more than what most folks around here make in 3 years. Black and gleaming, engine humming so quiet it barely disturbed the morning. My son Marcus stepped out first, in a suit that fit him like it had been poured onto his shoulders. Marcus is 34 now, though some mornings I still see the 7-year-old who used to sit on my workbench and hand me nails while I built his treehouse. He's a partner now, junior partner, but partner all the same at a firm downtown called Ashcroft Meridian, one of those glass tower places that does something with commercial development I still don't fully understand, even after he's explained it to me a dozen times. Behind him got out a woman I recognized from the pictures he'd sent, his fiancée, Renata. She had the kind of polish that takes real money to maintain, and she stood by the car door studying my gravel driveway like it might ruin her shoes just by existing. "Dad, Marcus said it the way you'd address a stranger who was blocking your path. We don't have much time. We're on our way to the site. Morning to you too, son." I set down my sanding block and wiped my hands on my apron. "Coffee's on if you want some." He didn't answer that. His eyes were on my hands, on the sawdust clinging to my forearms, on the flannel shirt I'd had since before he was born. "Look, I need to ask you something, and I need you to actually hear me." Renata hadn't said a word yet. She just watched me the way you'd watch something behind glass at a museum, curious, a little wary, careful not to get too close. "The ribbon cutting for the Meridian Tower project is Saturday," Marcus said. "There's press there. There's investors. Renata's parents are flying in her father's on the board of 3 different firms downtown, and I need this weekend to go exactly right." "That's wonderful, son. I'm proud of you." And I meant it. Whatever else was coming, I meant that part. "I need you to not be there." The words landed the way a dropped wrench lands on concrete, sharp, final, echoing longer than it should. I looked at him for a long moment, waiting for him to soften it, to explain it away as some kind of joke. He didn't. "You embarrass me in front of my partners, Dad. Every time. The way you dress, the way you talk about," he gestured vaguely at my whole self, "at the workshop, at the chair I'd been fixing. All of this. Renata's family has never even seen this house. I've told them you're retired from consulting. I can't have them meeting the real version." I felt something in my chest go very still and very quiet. The way the workshop goes quiet after the table saw finally stops spinning. "The real version," I repeated. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was checking his watch. "I want you nowhere near that building Saturday. Not the ceremony, not the reception, none of it." Renata finally spoke, and her voice was gentler than his, almost apologetic, though she made no move to disagree with him. It's an important weekend for us, Mr. Higgins. I hope you understand." I looked at my son's face, the same face that used to light up when I'd pick him up from Little League, the same hands I taught to hold a hammer properly, and I found nothing there now but impatience and a kind of shame he wasn't even trying to hide. I didn't yell. I didn't remind him whose hands built the very first house he ever lived in, or whose overtime paid for the tuition that got him into the business school that made all of this possible. I just nodded. The way you nod when a customer tells you the price is too high and there's no point arguing. Understood, I said quietly. You have a safe drive downtown. I watched the black car pull back down my gravel driveway and disappear around the bend, and I stood there a long moment in the sawdust, in the quiet, feeling something cold and clear settle over me, not rage, not yet. Something more like the stillness right before you make a decision you already know you can't undo. I want to tell you something about myself that Marcus doesn't fully understand, and that Renata certainly doesn't know. I didn't spend my life pouring concrete because it was all I could do. I spent my life pouring concrete because my father did it, and his father before him, and because there is an honesty in that work that I have never once found downtown, in any glass tower, at any board meeting. But what nobody outside my late wife Carol and a handful of very quiet men in very quiet offices know is that 30 years ago, Carol and I took a small masonry supply company that was about to go under and built it, brick by brick, quite literally, into Higgins Regional Materials. The company that, as it happens, supplies nearly every concrete foundation poured within 80 miles of this county, including, though he has never once bothered to ask, the foundation currently sitting underneath Ashcroft Meridian's brand new tower. I went inside, poured myself the coffee my son hadn't wanted, and I sat at my kitchen table for a long while, looking at a photograph of Carol from our 40th anniversary, 3 years before the cancer took her. She used to say that money reveals people slowly. The way water reveals a crack in a foundation, you don't see it all at once. You just start noticing the shape of it over time. I picked up my phone and called a man named Dale Pruitt, who has managed my company's finances since before Marcus could walk. Dale, I said, I need you to look into something for me, quietly. What am I looking for, Walt? Ashcroft Meridian. I want to know everything about the Meridian Tower project. Every invoice, every vendor, every dollar that's moved through that job since ground broke. There was a pause on the line, the particular pause of a man who's known you 30 years and can hear when something in your voice has changed. This about Marcus? It's about the truth, I said. Just get me the numbers. I want to be honest with you, friend. In that moment, I didn't yet know what I was looking for. I only knew that a man who is ashamed of his own father is usually hiding something else besides his father, and I intended to find out what. It took Dale 4 days to call me back, and when he did, his voice had a weight to it I didn't like. Walt, I need you to sit down. I was already sitting, out in the workshop, running a rag along that old rocking chair's armrest. Go ahead. There's a shell company, Meridian Site Solutions LLC. It was registered 8 months ago, and it's been billing Ashcroft Meridian for site remediation work that, as far as I can tell, was never actually performed. We're talking about a lot of money, Walt. $210,000 routed through invoices that Marcus personally approved. I sat very still in that workshop, listening to the radio hum, low in the background, feeling something inside me that was neither surprise nor satisfaction, but something colder and sadder than both. Whose name is on the LLC? That's the part you need to hear sitting down, Dale said. It's Renata's brother, Chase Ferlin. He's listed as the sole managing member. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. A man ashamed of a concrete-pouring father, about to marry into a family with 3 board seats between them, siphoning off a fortune through his own future brother-in-law's shell company. And somewhere in that tangle sat my own company's materials, poured into a foundation that a fraud was standing on top of. Dale, I want you to keep pulling that thread, quietly. I don't want a single email, a single phone call, outside of you and me and the 2 people at the firm you trust with your life. Build me a complete picture. Every transfer, every date, every signature. And when we have it, I looked out the workshop window at the gravel driveway where my son's car had disappeared 4 days earlier. We're going to let it run exactly on schedule, I said, straight through to Saturday. Over the next several days, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I put on a suit. Not the kind Marcus wears, but a good one. One Carol had picked out for me years ago for occasions I mostly avoided. I drove downtown to the offices of Higgins Regional Materials, into the actual boardroom I own but rarely visit, and I sat with Dale and 2 auditors he trusted completely, going through documents until my eyes ached. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Chase Ferlin's shell company wasn't just billing for phantom site work, it was systematically overbilling on legitimate materials orders too, skimming a percentage off every concrete and steel delivery that came through Higgins Regional, my own company, and splitting the difference with my son, who as project lead had signature authority over every invoice that crossed his desk. Marcus wasn't just looking the other way. Marcus was cashing checks. "There's something else," Dale said quietly, sliding a folder across the table. "The foundation inspection reports. 3 of them were falsified. Structural sign-offs that were never actually performed by the licensed engineer whose stamp is on them." I sat with that for a long moment. Whatever anger I might have felt toward a son who was ashamed of my hands had curdled into something much heavier, the understanding that my son, in his hunger to seem like more than he was, had been willing to let people walk into an unsafe building. "Get the county inspector's office the real reports," I said. "Today, not Saturday, today. Whatever else happens, nobody gets hurt because of my son's greed." That part wasn't about revenge. That part was about the fact that I have spent my whole life believing that concrete either holds or it doesn't, and there is no amount of ambition that changes the math. Dale looked at me for a long moment. "And the financial fraud piece? That," I said, "we save for Saturday at exactly 3 o'clock when the ribbon gets cut." I want to pause here and tell you something, friend, because I know some of you watching tonight have sat across a table from a child who looked at you like you were something they'd outgrown. It does not feel like power to plan a thing like this. It feels like grief. I love my son every single day of this. I still do. But there is a kind of love that has to be willing to let the truth land exactly where it's supposed to land, even when you would give anything to catch it first. Saturday morning arrived gray and cool, with a low fog sitting over the valley the way it does most mornings out past the county line. I got up early, same as always, and I made coffee, same as always. But instead of my flannel shirt, I put on the midnight blue suit Carol had chosen all those years ago, the one that had hung untouched in the back of my closet since her funeral. I stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, an old man in fine wool, and thought about how strange it is that the truth of a person rarely matches what they're wearing. Dale picked me up at 10. In the back seat sat a sealed folder 2 inches thick, invoices, wire transfers, falsified signatures, all of it organized with the precision of a man who has spent 30 years making sure numbers tell the truth even when people don't want them to. Beside the folder sat something else. A letter from the county building inspector's office confirming that Higgins Regional Materials, as the primary supplier of record, was formally requesting an emergency structural review of the Meridian Tower site, a request that, as the actual owner of the materials company, was entirely within my rights to make, and one that could not legally be ignored, especially not on the very day the building was set to open to the public. We arrived at the site a little before 2. I want you to picture it. Friend, a plaza of gleaming glass and steel, string lights, a red ribbon stretched across the entrance wide as a highway, a jazz trio playing near a table of champagne flutes, and somewhere in the crowd of 200 well-dressed people, my son, standing at a podium rehearsing his remarks, utterly unaware that the foundation beneath his shining new tower and beneath his entire career had just been formally flagged for emergency inspection. I didn't walk in right away. Dale and I stood near the edge of the plaza, watching Renata's father shake hands with men in tailored suits, watching Marcus laugh at something one of his partners said, watching Chase Furland, a thin, nervous man I recognized from the LLC paperwork, hover near the open bar, checking his phone every few seconds like a man waiting for very bad news. At 2:45, the county inspector arrived exactly as scheduled, flanked by 2 site engineers in orange vests, holding the emergency review notice in a manila folder not unlike the one Dale carried. I watched the ripple move through the crowd as people noticed men in hard hats, walking toward a ribbon cutting. Marcus saw them first. I watched the color drain from his face in real time, watched him glance toward his own father-in-law-to-be, watched him understand, all at once, that something was happening that he had absolutely no control over. That's when I walked forward. I didn't rush. I have never once in my life found that rushing improves anything. I walked through that crowd of strangers in my late wife's chosen suit, past caterers and reporters and men who did something with money I'll never fully understand, until I was standing directly in front of my son, close enough that he had no choice but to see me. "Dad," his voice cracked on the word. "What are you? You can't be here. What is this?" "I came to give you your ribbon-cutting gift, son." I set the sealed folder down on the podium in front of him, in front of the microphone, in front of 200 people who had gone very quiet. Everything you need is in there. Every transfer Chase Furlan's company took from Higgins Regional Materials. Every falsified inspection report. Every dollar you signed off on that never should have moved. Someone near the back gasped. Renata's father stepped closer, his face hardening into something I imagine he uses in boardrooms. You said your father was retired from consulting, Renata said slowly, staring at me now like she was seeing me for the first time, which, in a way, she was. I own the company that poured the concrete under your feet, I said. And I said it plainly, without triumph, because there wasn't any triumph in it. Higgins Regional Materials. Founded it with my late wife 30 years ago, out of a garage not unlike the workshop my son was too ashamed to let you visit. Marcus stood frozen, the folder open in his shaking hands, the inspection report on top, his own falsified signature staring back up at him under the string lights. I told you not to come, he said, and his voice had lost all its polish now, all its board meeting confidence. It just sounded like a boy. You told me my hands embarrassed you, I said. You told me not to come near this building, so I made sure the building came to you instead, every truth about it. Right here, in front of everyone you were trying so hard to impress. I want you to understand something, friend, because this is the part that matters most to me. I did not do this because I wanted to humiliate my son in front of strangers. I did it because a man who is ashamed of honest hands will eventually be ashamed of honesty itself, and somebody has to be the one who refuses to let that slide. Sometimes that somebody has to be the father who taught you how to swing a hammer in the first place. The inspector's team moved in. Chase Furlan didn't even try to run. He just sat down hard in a folding chair near the champagne table, staring at nothing. Renata's father pulled her aside, speaking low and fast, already doing the math on what this would cost his own reputation if he stayed 1 minute longer. Within 20 minutes, the ribbon cutting that had been planned for months had dissolved into a quiet, humiliating exodus of investors and reporters, all of them walking away with a very different story than the one Marcus had spent a year preparing to tell. Marcus found me by my truck an hour later, his tie gone, his jacket wrinkled, his eyes red in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy who'd broken something he loved. You destroyed everything, he said. Everything I built. No, son. I opened my truck door, unhurried. Chase Furlan and your own signature destroyed everything you built. I just made sure the truth got there before somebody got hurt standing in a building with a falsified foundation report. Renata's gone. Her father's already talking about the partners cutting ties with me. I have nothing. I looked at my son for a long moment, and I felt every year of him growing up pass behind my eyes, the treehouse, the Little League games, the day he left for business school so proud of himself, so sure that concrete and sawdust were things he was leaving behind forever. You have your name, I said quietly. You have two good hands. Your mother and I built an entire company out of less than that, in a garage, eating canned soup so the lights stayed on. What you don't have anymore is a lie standing between you and the truth of who you actually are. That's not nothing, Marcus. That's actually the only thing that was ever going to save you. He didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there in the fading light of that ruined afternoon, looking, for the first time in years, like a man who understood exactly how small his shame had made him. I drove home alone that evening, back past the county line, back to the gravel driveway and the workshop and the old rocking chair, still waiting for its final coat of oil. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the particular exhaustion of a man who has just watched something necessary and sad happen at the same time. 6 months passed since that afternoon. The seasons turned the way they always do out past the county line. The fog gave way to a hard, bright winter, and then to a soft green spring that smelled like turned earth and new grass. Higgins Regional Materials is still standing, still pouring honest concrete under honest buildings, same as it did the day Carol and I started it. Dale still calls me every Tuesday, same as always. Mostly just to talk now instead of to deliver bad news. Marcus called me 2 months ago, for the first time since that ribbon cutting. His voice was different, quieter, stripped of the polish he used to wear like a second suit. He's working construction now, not management, out of a firm 2 counties over, learning what it actually means to pour a foundation with his own 2 hands, instead of just signing off on somebody else's. He asked if he could come by the workshop sometime. I told him the coffee's always on. I still spend most mornings out in that workshop, restoring furniture nobody else wants, running my thumb along old joints to see where the glue has failed. I still wear the flannel. I still smell like sawdust more often than not. And most days, if you drove past my house, out past the county line, You'd have no earthly idea that the man sanding down an old rocking chair on his back porch owns the company whose name is stamped into half the foundations in this county. That's exactly how I like it, friend. Because in the end, the truest measure of a man was never the suit he wore to the ribbon cutting. It was always just the honesty of his hands and whether he was willing to let that truth stand, even when somebody he loved was ashamed to let anyone see it.